Okay, so I guess what I'm going to do today is give you really what I hope that you get is a way to study the Gita. There's no way I can tell you all about the Gita. It's a short book, but it's a huge topic. A lot of people, when they do commentaries on it, they would just spend, most pundits, which is sort of an Indian scholar, they would just take one shloka or one, which is like 4 lines, and they would just expound on that shloka. And so they just go on and on that way. So it's a rather large subject, and my biggest problem is trying to figure out what to say, what not to say, and so we'll see what emerges from that. But I did want to contextualize it first. The Gita is part of the longest piece of literature ever written, called the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is approximately 3 times the Judeo-Christian Bible in length. It's so long that no person has lived long enough to translate it in English. There was someone in the University of Chicago got pretty far along, and then he died, and he was supposed to pass it on to his students, and they never picked up the ball. So a full line-by-line translation of the Mahabharata is unavailable in English even to this day. I can sympathize with not wanting to pick it up, and it's written in sort of a middle, well, it might be called like a middle period Sanskrit, sometimes called classical Sanskrit, and it was probably solidified in its form maybe about 2,500 years ago, maybe a little earlier. The stories were sort of maybe gathered from many different stories. There are things all over the place. Even the whole Ramayana is inside the Mahabharata. At one point they decided to tell that story. The Ramayana, the story of Rama and Sita.
What do you call it,
Ramayana.
Is it also known as the Ramayana?
Right. As we said before, you stress the antepenultimate syllable, so it's Ramayana. It would be a closer approximation of how to say it, rather than Ramanaya. So, right. Well, you've never heard the word chakra pronounced correctly either. So,
What is it correct?
that chakra. So. It was written about that long ago. The Gita was probably inserted into the Mahabharata as a whole piece. A lot of people think that. It may or may not have. Mostly because in most of the Mahabharata, Krishna is not a major player. And then all of a sudden, Krishna appears as the manifestation of Vishnu, and the Mahabharata gets sort of reworked, as they say, Krishnaized sometimes. So he becomes more important. They start, his stories start coming up as being more important than other people. Now this is an ongoing theme in most philosophies, but what we have in Indian philosophy is an actual record of the changes throughout the time, because it's the longest continuous. Hi, Grace. We just got started, so it's okay. It's the longest really continuous system that we have a record of, and it's still a living system. And in fact, Sanskrit's the only ancient language that we know how it's pronounced, because its pronunciation is extremely important. Although you may not know it by me, but it is important for the pundits who spend a long time learning how to say everything exactly right. So there's a good chance that it's pronounced, if not exactly, very close to the way it was pronounced, 5,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago. And Sanskrit literature begins with the Rig Veda. And the Rig Veda, there's all sorts of arguments on how old that is. Some say 5,000 years old, some say 7,000, some put it way, way back. It's hard to say, and a lot of that has to do whether you buy into the Aryan invasion of India. So,
It was always taught to us as a given.
the Aryan invasion, right? Well, there are a lot of people that are trying to argue against that. That's a whole other story. But there are astrological and other kind of things, textual things that make people wonder exactly what was going on with that. But be that as it may, they're really old. And in the Indian literature, the Rig Veda and the Upanishads, the oldest texts, are considered Shruti. Now, Shruti means heard. So those are the original texts. Now, what that means is this was the original vision. Now, so this came down through what are called the 7 rishis, or the 7 seers. Now, they're the 7 ancient sages. Greece had 7 sages. A lot of people have seven sages as a progenitor of a culture. So the 7 rishis bring in the Rig Veda, and they're the original seers. Now the first several thousand years of Sanskrit literature are called Shruti, which means it's heard, and it's an oral culture, as in A-U-R-A-L. Right? Everything is heard, everything is passed down from ear to ear. Nothing is written and seen. Okay. So after that, at a certain point, which would roughly 500 BC, 1000 BC, it's not exact. The later literature, which includes the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, is called Smrti. Now, Smrti means to remember. So what you're doing is you're remembering the original vision of the earlier age, and in a sense recapitulating it. So much of the movement of Indian philosophy is this change, and once, if you study it, you can see how the gods change. For example, the most prominent gods in India, Vishnu and Shiva, were really minor players. Shiva actually isn't even mentioned in the Rig Veda, and he sort of came from this god called Rudra. Vishnu is a very not mentioned all that much. The major gods were Indra, among others. So that's kind of like just a real broad brush. So the Bhagavad Gita is Smrti, but the thing to remember, it's remembered. Okay, and a lot of what goes on in the Bhagavad Gita is this remembering. At the end, when Arjuna is ready, he says, "I have remembered." All right, so this is the important thing. So what I wanted to do.
Question, please.
Yes.
You're saying that the first Shruti was oral teachings, and then 5000 BC was Smrti, was things remembered and recapitulated. Do they do it, or do they add to it?
It's a different set of literature.
So what are the two called, other than English, or is it just Smrti and...
Shruti and Smrti, yeah, they're not really translated. You could say heard and remembered.
Well, we just know it as the Bhagavad Gita in one context. Is that what the Bhagavad Gita refers to, those two?
Bhagavad Gita is a short text within this big Mahabharata. It's all considered Smrti. It's all considered as part of the later literature. Okay. But what I wanted to show is that the activity of the Bhagavad Gita is, in a certain sense, a redoing of a Vedic myth. Okay, and there are several thousand Rig Vedic myths, but the one that pertains to this, at least that I'd like to talk about, has to do with Indra and Vritra. Indra is the king of the gods. Roughly, you could roughly make him equivalent to Zeus or Thor. His weapon is the thunderbolt. And what Indra does, one of his main activities, is to drink soma. Now, soma was, and that's another whole story. Soma is something that they took. There was a soma ritual. Soma was something that was ingested. What it was, no one knows. Everybody's got theories as to what it was. But he would drink the soma, and he would slay this demon or this dragon called Vritra, V-R-T-R-A. And what Vritra comes from the root vrit, that it means to conceal and to cover. And a lot of that is also on the sheet here, on the front here. So, Vritra means to conceal or cover. And when Indra slays Vritra, what typically happens is the waters start to flow, or the cows are released, but mostly the waters are flowing. And also in one Vedic hymn, the 7 rivers are flowing, which may be representative of the 7 rishis. Now, and Vishnu plays a small part in this because Vishnu steals Soma for Indra. Now, the reason I'm bringing up Indra is because Arjuna is a son, I won't say he's a full avatar, but he's a son of Indra. His mother was human, but his father was Indra. So that's why I'm bringing Indra into this. And Krishna is considered an avatar of Vishnu. In other words, Vishnu incarnates himself from age to age. And in the age having to do with the Bhagavad Gita, no, I'll get to that when we get to that. We'll stick to this. So Vishnu has 10 avatars. The 8th is Krishna, the 9th is Gautama Buddha, and the 10th is called Kalki, or also in Buddhism they call him the Maitreya Buddha. So that's the Buddha that's supposed to come at the end of this particular age. Whether this is the end of the age or not is a whole other story too. But there are, in fact, if you look on the internet, there are at least a couple of people who claim to be Kalki. So Kalki, it's on the sheet also. So, but Vishnu is in the Rig Veda is a friend of Indra's. He steals Soma for Indra, and one of the aspects of Vishnu is that in 3 strides he creates the world. Now, there's so after Indra slays Vritra, okay, a couple of things happen. Well, besides the release of the waters, he gets a title called Vishvakarman, which means the maker of all. The cosmos gets set into revolution, and it said he fixes the earth in the sky like wheels on an axle. And he also does a little dance because he's drunk from the Soma. So I want to bring this up for a couple of things. There's a couple of readings of this. Now, one is that it's a story of the creation. So it's a story of the movement. Now, Vritra is covering up the unmanifest, and Vritra slays that covering, and the waters flow forth, or the cows, which are considered, aspects of fertility. All right, everything is allowed to become manifest. Now, this happens on a couple of different levels to me. All right, it happens one at the beginning of an age, but it also happens moment to moment. All right, and we go back into this again and again, but the movement, one of the main themes in the yoga philosophy is this continuous reabsorption into the one and then back out into the manifestation. It's a continuous process going on and on. So they say in one of the Vedic hymns that Indra slays Vritra over and over again. Indra has to keep slaying Vritra. All right, so this is not something that happened 5,000 years ago. This is something that is ongoing every moment as we're sitting here. The world is continuously being generated out of that particular mythological movement. Is that kind of clear? And it's not easy. I'm not expecting you to see that. In fact, yogis will spend lifetimes getting quiet enough to see that.
But well done. Anyway, I had a question a couple of paragraphs back, and that was, you said that Maitreya, that there are several that claim to be the reincarnation of this deity now, or the Buddha reincarnated.
Is that what you were saying?
Yeah,
That there are several, would they claim it, or would they not claim it?
exactly. If someone claims it,
For them?
yeah. As soon as someone claims it, I just doubt it immediately. And okay, just for
So
my.
there could be that somebody out there may be incarnated as this, but they would never claim it.
That may.
Maybe others would recognize them.
That may be true. I don't know that.
I didn't say it's not happening in the past years at least.
Right, right. So, like I said, if this is the end of the age, of the end of the age, and who knows,
When-
their age, their end of their age might be different than the end of our age. So,
Can I add something to that?
please.
What's your opinion about Mayor Baba, who claims to be the reincarnation of Krishna as well as there's many others? And
I don't know.
claims that-
I don't know enough about Mayor Baba, and I've not read him. I don't know him too well, so I don't have an opinion. And there are different ways, and we'll get into this too. And there are different ways of incarnating, too. You know. So, all right. So this is one aspect of this myth. All right. Vritra is slain, and manifestation occurs either continuously or at the beginning of the age. All right. Now, but what this also has to do with us as people on a spiritual path. All right, Vritra also, and this comes out of the work of Antonio de Nicolas, at least he put it in this book on the Rig Veda, that it's also a congealed perspective from a human point of view. So you have a stuck perspective. You're seeing things in a certain way, and you're only seeing it in that way, and that perspective is almost always going to be leading to suffering. Now, something's going to have to. In order for another perspective to live, that perspective is going to have to die. Okay? And so it's another aspect of that mythological movement of opening yourself up to other possibilities and other perspectives. Something else popped in, but it popped out. I was just going to say, and there's also another way, and I guess another way I was thinking of also looking at it is that this covering of ritual is also covering wisdom, which is kind of the same sort of thing, way of looking at it. The way it's you're covering from a stuck perspective. Now, in the Rig Vedic chants, from a musicological standpoint, each time they would chant a hymn, they would generate, for those of you interested in music, a whole tonal system with each hymn. So and then they would sacrifice it for the next hymn. In other words, they wouldn't use it again. So each one would be a new perspective, so a new way of seeing coming out of it. And the Rig Vedic hymns, really, from their point of view, there's music involved. There's the structure of Sanskrit language. They're incredibly sophisticated things that we can only barely begin to understand. The depth of what was going on or what is going on with them. So that kind of gets us through the Rig Vedic part. Now, so we jump to the next age. Now, one way that the Mahabharata begins is that the Earth Mother, Prithvi, it's gotten pretty dark. It's the end of the age. People aren't as nice as they used to be. There's lots of bloodshed, lots of people clamoring and kind of making a mess of things. And she's pretty tired of it all. So she goes up to the gods and says, guys, what can we do about this? And they're kind of like, hemming and hawing, do we gotta? And finally she says, well, look, if we, I'll just stop working, And if I stop working, everything stops, and there's be no people left. There's no people left to worship you. You guys won't exist. So they said, all right. So Vishnu says, all right, well, I'm going to send myself yet again to go down and fix things up. So Vishnu incarnates as Krishna. So the story of the Mahabharata takes place at the end of the last yuga, the yuga before this one, which is the Kali Yuga. Okay. And it was called the Trita Yuga. And I don't want to get into the yugas because that's another complex thing. Just consider it an age, and we don't worry about how long they were or anything like that, because there's a whole bunch of things going on.
This one is the Kali and that one was the Shruti.
Trita, TRT, or TRTYA. This means third. Or bronze, if you go from golden to silver to bronze to iron, if you can do it that way. So, you have to start somewhere. It's a huge story. So, I'm going to start with Bhishma. Now, Bhishma is this incredible warrior. He's the son of Shamantu. S with a slash over it is like an SH. S with a dot under it, or see, anything with a dot under it is called a retroflex, which means you say it with your tongue curled back behind your teeth. And that's how you get an automatic Indian accent if you want. So this would be Yudhishthira. All right, and I phase in and out of it, but I try. So that means a retroflex, which means your tongue is curled back when you say it. Okay, so Samantu, they start saying, well, Bhishma is the son of Samantu, and they start saying, well, you don't have any other sons. Now, a lot of this has to do with lineage. And I'll say in general that a lot of it has to do with lineage being messed up. And one way of looking at it is the old days, everything was passed down, father to son, mother to daughter. Everything was passed down that way. So if you were born a Vedic seer, your son was going to become a Vedic seer. That's just the way it was structured then. There was very, very little movement. And that, at the end of this age, is breaking down. So this whole, what Steiner gets called bloodline, becomes disrupted. This whole movement, this way of transmission. Another way of transmission is going to have to emerge, and that, unfortunately, is going to involve effort. All right, and this is what Krishna and Arjuna are talking about. In a lot of ways, it's your own personal working, as opposed to a lot of direct transmission. Okay, there's one way of looking at it. Shamantu has no other sons. So they're kind of saying, well, if something happens to Bhishma, we've got no sons. And I apologize to all the women here about this focus on sons, but it's theirs. King of the fishermen has a daughter, Satyavati. Samantu likes the daughter. Bhishma goes to the king of the fishermen and says, King Shamantu would like to have your daughter for marriage. The king of the fishermen says, that'd be great. But you're the eldest. Her sons won't go to the throne. And so Bhishma says, he loves his father. He says, hey, I don't need the throne. Her sons will become the kings. And he says, Bhishma, you're an honorable guy. I believe you. But if you have sons, I can't trust them. So Bhishma says, well, that's it. I take a vow. He takes what's called the brahmacharya vow, which is as he says, I abjure all women in marriage. So he takes a vow of continence. The skies open up, lightning comes down, all the gods start singing, and apparently makes them happy. So Bhishma takes this vow. So fine, Shamantu marries Satyavati. They have a son. Shamantu dies. He's kind of weak. So they send Bhishma out, because now he's got to have sons. Bhishma is the first son of Shamantu. He's taken his vow. Okay? If you get lost now, we're in trouble. Alright? So they do have a son. Alright? So this guy becomes the king. Chitra Virya. Virya means hero. But he's kind of a weakling, so they sent Bhishma out. Now in those days, one way that you found yourself a wife if you were of the warrior caste, and this is about the warrior caste, the warrior king caste. you would go out and you would have these contests. And either the winner of the contest would win the wife, or as in the Ramayana, the wife would choose amongst all the warriors. It wouldn't be necessarily who won. In the Ramayana, it was easy for Sita because all the gods came and fought in that one, and Rama had to beat the gods in that. But she could tell the difference because they were the gods were the ones that were like 6 inches off the ground. Which, if you remember from Shart, all the statues with the feet pointing down, right? So those are all divinities, right? So it's the same sort of thing in Indian philosophy. That's how you can tell, in case you want to know. You're walking down the street, and you don't know if someone's a god or not. They're just a little off the ground. So, Bhishma wins not one but 3 wives. Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika, which is, I don't know, sort of like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. I don't know, they kind of like go together. So, he wins 3 wives for Vichit Travirya. Now, the other thing about Bhishma, when he takes his vow of continence, the gods grant him a boon. And his boon is he gets to choose his time of death. So he hangs on a long time.
So when he gets the wife, that's when he gets the chariot?
When he gets...
Or gets the chariot that carries the girls back?
Yeah. I guess so. So he's when these 3 wives, they go back, and this guy dies. He's a weakling. So now you've got the 3 wives. Amba goes to Bhishma and says, I really love this other guy. This other guy loves me. So Bhishma says, hey, go back. You guys love each other. Great. She goes back to the other guy, whose name I can't remember right now. And he says, well, look, you've been with Bhishma. I don't want you now. She goes back to Bhishma. Bhishma, you got to marry me. This guy rejected me. And he says, look, I got this vow. I can't mess up on that. So she looks him in the eye and says, I'm going to spend the rest of my life figuring out a way to kill you. And he's like, well, you can't. That's just the way it is. She says, I don't care. That's what I'm going to do. So she spends the whole Mahabharata and appears everyone here and there. She says, I will walk a straight line to find out a way to kill you. And she does, but not in this life. To make a long story short, she eventually, studies under the greatest ascetics because becomes, incredibly powerful dark force. But she can't kill him. But what she does, she dies and reincarnates as a man, and then goes into the battle against Bhishma. And Bhishma won't fight him because he knows it was a woman. And that's how Bhishma finally dies. But that's a side story. But that's one pointed devotion to something.
That was Amba that did that?
Right, that was Amba. Now these two women, all right, there's no son. Bhishma's not doing anything. So now, where are we going to get our sons? Okay? They call him Vyasa. Who's Vyasa? Vyasa's writing the poem. Vyasa's right. Vyasa means the compiler. Yeah, Vyasa means compiler. So there's lots of Vyasas all over the place, where there is one or many. So in the context of this, he's sort of a relative, but he's also a Brahmin. He's living out in the woods. He's an ascetic. He stinks. He's dirty. So they call him in. He says, "Look, hurry up. We need this done." So he comes in. He's not washed up or anything. He goes into the court. There's the Indian woman and all their finery and everything. So he goes to Ambika, goes to her bedroom. She takes a look at him, goes like this, closes her eyes. All right. She gives birth to a blind man, Dhritarashtra. Okay. Vyasa goes to Ambalika. She kept her eyes open, but she turned pale. So she gives birth to Pandu, which means, of all things, pale. So those are the 2 sons. They get born. And Vyasa then goes back to writing his poem. So Dhritarashtra is the eldest, but he can't really rule because he's blind. So Pandu is the de facto king, and Dhritarashtra is the sort of the technical king. So here you have a further fracturing of this whole bloodline thing. This is the easy version. But I really want you to get an idea of where we are. We're getting close to the Gita. But it's a great story. I love telling it. Pandu has two wives, Kunti and Madri. Dhritarashtra has a wife whose name I believe is Gandharva. When he marries her, because he's blind, she puts a veil around her eyes and never takes it off for the rest of her life. If her husband can't see her, she would never see her husband. So, yeah, different level of devotion going on. All right. Pandu marries Kunti and Madri. Pandu's still young. He's out hunting one day, and he sees a stag, and he shoots it with the arrow. Well, it turns out it was actually a stag and a doe copulating, but he killed them both with one shot. But not it turned out to be that, but it turned out to be a very powerful ascetic and his wife, who had turned themselves into deer for fun. And, no experience there. So anyway, but in his dying breath, he says, because you have disrupted our lovemaking, the second that you make love will be your death. So there's another problem with the sons, right? Poor Pandu. So his wife Kunti says, well, when I was a girl, I learned, I was devoted to this particular sage, and he granted me this, so I'm looking for the saying, not potion, mantra, something like that, to call in. She can call in divinities to have children with her and still remain a virgin. So while she was, I guess she got kind of excited and tried it out while she was a young girl. And she called in Surya, the sun god, and had Karna. And then Karna, very Moses-like, and then she has Karna, who's born in full armor, in golden armor. But she just kind of puts him in a basket, sends him down the river like Moses. And he gets picked up by just basic working class people. Okay. So she knows it works anyway. So Pandu says, well, look, what are we going to do? Dhritarashtra, in the meantime, is starting to have 100 sons. All right. So she goes, okay, so who do I call? So first person she calls is Dharma. Okay. And this should be on your sheet too. Dharma. So that's the eldest son, Yudhishthira. So that's the first god. Dharma as a god, not Dharma itself. And Dharma is very important. The second she calls in is Vayu, which is the god of the wind. And that is Bhima. And Bhima is this big, burly windbag, essentially. The third she calls is Indra, the king of the gods, and the greatest warrior. All right? So that becomes Arjuna. All right, Madri at this point says, okay, can I get into the action? She teaches her, and she has twins, what are called the Ashvin twins, Nakula and Sahadeva. Saha means with the gods. I forget what Nakula means. In fact, I probably even have them in here. But anyway, so she has the Ashvin twins. So these are the 5 brothers on one side of the Mahabharata war. Okay? Though Arjuna is the greatest warrior, Yudhishthira is the head of the family, being the eldest. Now, had they known they had an older brother, they would have had to give him up because he is Dharma. If they had known he had an older brother, he would have given up the kingdom for him. But they go through the whole war not knowing that they're fighting against their older brother. All right. Though Kunti knows, the mother knows. She figures it out. Dhritarashtra has 100 sons. The eldest of the son is Duryodhana, means dirty fighter. When in actual fact, he actually, when the war comes around, he fights cleaner than anyone else, but beforehand he's pretty dirty. All right, Bhishma, great unkillable warrior, almost, and he teaches. So you got all these 5 brothers and the 100 sons, and they're all kind of cousins. So they're all growing up in the same place. Pandu's gone. Pandu couldn't hold back. He made love with Marjorie, and that was it. Died on the spot, and Marjorie did the weird Indian thing of being buried with her husband. So you have these five guys, Dhritarashtra and his brothers, and they bring in this teacher named Drona as the greatest arts teacher for fighting arts and for all kinds of arts. So they grow up studying under these guys in sort of the same encampment, and they have all these, squabbles and things like that. But when it comes down to it, Yudhishthira emerges as the king. And what he does is he and his brothers go and sort of make a conquest of the surrounding areas, get fealty from all the local kings, and he becomes like pretty much the big cheese. Duryodhana is not particularly pleased with that because he's actually the eldest son of the king. He's older, but technically, is he king or isn't he? He's blind, so who should really be? So this whole succession thing is in question again. Who should really be the head? I mean, he is the eldest, but on the other hand, Pandu was really the king. So there's always these nuances. They grow up together, and eventually Yudhishthira sort of carves out a pretty large kingdom for himself and his sons. One day, Arjuna comes home and says to his mother, Kunti, Mom, look what I won. And she goes, well, you got to share it with your brothers. He says, well, I just want a wife. So, but her word, Dharma, her word was absolute law. You couldn't. She said it. So Draupadi got shared between the five brothers. And they eventually, I think they worked it out, whereas I think there were 1 or 2 years with each one. And again, she would manage to maintain her virginity. But, so at some point, so he's got a king, things are going pretty well for Yudhishthira and the boys. At one point, Arjuna goes off and he does something he runs into Maya. Maya is a divinity. Maya is not, usually Maya is translated as illusion, but Maya is also power. And Maya is closer to really Shakti than it is to illusion. And at least my take on it is that it's illusion in the sense that if you think that this solid world is the only world that there is, that's the illusion. It's not that this world is illusory, that your experience itself is illusory, but only in the sense that if you think that this is all it is, if you don't think there's a spiritual component to it. That's my personal take on Maya. But he's still a trickster. And he wins a boon, so Arjuna asks Maya to build a palace for him. So he builds this great palace. And they invite Duryodhana to come over and see it. Say, cuz, come on over, check out the new palace. So Duryodhana comes over. Well, of course, it's built by Maya. So, he goes to drink from a fountain, but it's solid water. He thinks he's going through a doorway, but it's rock. So and these guys are just like cracking up. So it's like this whole sophomoric scene.
This is Arjuna that had this built?
Well, Arjuna had won the boon from Maya. And then he asked Maya, he saved Maya from Agni, which is a whole other thing. But Agni is a fire deity. So he wins his boon, and so the boon he asked of Maya is to build the palace for them. So Duryodhana, he's just like, he can't handle being made fun of like that. So he says, all right, well, I'm going to get these boys. So he challenges Yudhishthira to a game of dice. We're getting close. In the game of dice, Yudhishthira can't refuse it. But Duryodhana gets his uncle to play for him. His uncle may or may not be dirty, who knows. But he plays. The uncle plays for him. Yudhishthira just starts losing everything. He loses his jewels, loses his cattle, loses his kingdom. Duryodhana is beside himself. He loses everything. Keeps on playing. He loses his brothers. He loses himself, then he loses Draupadi. So they call Draupadi in. Now Draupadi, they drag her in. Now Draupadi is not supposed to be seen by anybody. It's her time of the month. They bring her into the middle of everything. And they start, Duryodhana and his brothers and his uncles, they start pulling her sari off to make her stand naked in front of the whole group. And the brothers, because Yudhisthira has lost himself, they're bound by dharma not to do anything. They just stand there and watch. So pulling and pulling, well somebody, some say Krishna, pulls off a miracle, because they're pulling and pulling and pulling, and it just keeps on coming. After they get like a half a mile of sari, they give up. Okay. And Draupadi, of course, says, wait, you already lost yourself. How could you lose me? You didn't have any right to lose me. A lot of weird little logic things going on. Anyway, the upshot of it is Dhritarashtra, the old man, kind of says, oh, this isn't right, you know. So they end up with this deal. The deal is the 5 brothers go into exile. Go into exile for 12 years. 13th year, they stay undercover. They're not allowed to be found by anyone for that 13th year. At that point, if no one's found them during that 13th year, then they get their kingdom back. They all agreed to this. Okay? Boys go undercover. They wander in the forest for 12 years. They take nothing with them except Draupadi, a few ascetics to tell them stories. In the 13th year, they go undercover to a court of another king. They'll basically dress up as women. Yudhisthira learns how to play dice better. Arjuna becomes like a dance teacher to the king's daughters or something. Anyway, they don't get found out, even though Duryodhana and the boys try to kill him. They try to find him and kill him, but it didn't work out. So they show up. All right, 13 years. You know, give us the kingdom back. And literally Duryodhana says, yeah, you and what army? So you and what army is going to take this kingdom away from me? Duryodhana has been a pretty good king. He's like, you ain't going to take this away from me. So these guys got to build up an army. So then everybody gets sort of their friends together. And Krishna, friend of Arjuna, says to Arjuna, well look, and Duryodhana, I'll give you guys a choice. One of you can have my army fully armed, ready to fight. Krishna is kind of has a principality of some sort. You can have my army ready to fight, fully armed. The other has me, unarmed, and I will not fight. Duryodhana says, I'll take the army. Arjuna says, I'll take Krishna. So, the day of the battle comes, and so there they are, the all armies come out into the field, and sort of and then they sort of, the story is told, now we're getting to the Gita. The story is told by some Jaya who is given the ability to see everything that's going on in the battle. So he sits on a hillside with Dhritarashtra and tells him everything that's going on. Okay, so starts off, so the first line of the Gita is Dharma Kshetra Kuru Kshetra. All right, Kuru is named for both families. So Kshetra is field. So first line of the Gita is the field of Dharma. In the field of Dharma, in the field of the Kurus. All right, what do they do? Dhritarashtra is asking, well, what's going on? So they give out this sort of list of the warriors there. And then Krishna, Arjuna says first they all start blowing their conchas, right? So it begins in this total chaotic sound, all right? Talking about emerging from the oral, sort of chaotic sound. Everybody blows their conchas. And I would have brought, if I had a conch, I would have brought one. It's a pretty wild sound. Nobody, you notice, in the New Age market sells conch CDs. You know, it's just not out there. They've got everything, but they don't have, no one goes, you know, the art of conch. So, anyway, Arjuna says to Krishna, Krishna has decided to be his chariot driver. He's just going to drive his chariot. Arjuna says, pull out my chariot in between the two armies and stop my chariot in between these two armies so that I may see who I am to fight against. So who does he see? All right, he sees his family. You can take him or leave him, but you still don't generally want to fight against them in a war. He sees Drona. Drona taught him everything he knows about archery, about all sorts of fighting, and about meditation, and about everything. He's learned everything he knows. Drona is his beloved teacher. Bhishma is also his teacher. You know, he says, how can I fight against these people? You know, I can't see anything good coming out of this. So he just falls weak. He drops his bow, and he falls into a state of grief. And maybe we'll take a break there and pick it up. Okay?